Detroit, Detroit is different. Detroit, Detroit is different. Culture and life we live in. Detroit, Detroit is different. Detroit, Detroit is different. Detroit, Detroit is different. Culture and life we live in. Detroit, Detroit is different.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studios, you already see that the green is going because greens are coming to you. And in partnership with this, it brings different people that have poured into community. And in studio, I have a guest that's definitely looking at how we can empower communities so much more. And actually, as I found out before the interview, grew up and very familiar with a little bit of my neighborhood, as we were even already talking about blocks and streets and this side and that side, so much more. And we're going to talk about how the relationship between what you all may look at as, oh, here we go, numbers, statistics, data, and information like that really go into how we can justify to others that our communities are needed to be invested in and uplifted. Jane, Fran, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Khary?
Oh, everything is good. Everything is good. Everything is good. So with this starting off, we always kick Detroit is Different off so much about the relationship between people in Detroit. And as I said before, you already began speaking about a little bit of the neighborhood and the footprint. Talking about that Buena Vista. So if you know my neighborhood, you know some of these streets and everything.
I know some of these streets.
Yeah. So let's start there. How many generations deep is your family to Detroit?
Really, my dad. He came here as a child, I think about 4 years old from Georgia. And so that's as far back on his side of the family that it goes. My mother is from, believe it or not, Wyoming. Not Wyoming, Michigan, the state of Wyoming, from Green River, Wyoming.
Yep.
So she came here after college.
You said Grand River, Wyoming. People still thinking the west side. Like, I grew up over there. McKenzie. It's like, no. Wyoming, like Great Plains.
Cattle, right. That Wyoming.
All right. So both, I would say that will put you as like a first generation starting things off. But let's get a little bit into the Georgia story.
Well, I don't know a ton about the Georgia story because he was so young when he came here, and the family there just wasn't a lot of connection between his family here and in Georgia. You know, big family, 11 kids, all of that. But so I've never been. He's from Douglas, Georgia. I've never been there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Wyoming. Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, just real unusual circumstances. But my mother was born in a mining town in Wyoming, grew up in Green River. I think they were maybe one of just a couple of black families in Wyoming, which was not segregated, interestingly enough, at the time. And so, they went to school together, which they weren't doing a lot of places, but went to Howard University when she went to college because she had never really been around black people a lot, and came here for a visit. She got a job with the Detroit Public Library. In fact, she was earlier in her career one of the librarians at Parkman Branch Library, which is, as you know, right in the neighborhood.
Wow. Okay. All right. You've answered questions that I was gonna get to already, but no. I love it. I love it because that unfolds so much more. So, librarian, interest in Howard. So many people say like, yeah, I went on an HBCU bus tour. I don't think necessarily that was what was happening, but librarian meaning avid reader. How did your mom even discover Howard University from Wyoming? What was the relationship?
Well, she actually transferred to Howard from Langston, which is another HBCU in Oklahoma. And she had family, I think an uncle who had taught there. So she went there. I think that was the connection that got her there. Her mother went to to Langston also. So I am fortunate enough to be third generation college educated, which was, kind of unusual back in the day. And then after about a year at Langston, she wanted to transfer to Howard, pledged AKA,
Mm,
did all of that, came to Detroit a couple times for a visit, got the job here, met my dad. The
okay.
rest is history.
Okay. All right. So you get into like the next iteration of that and family and you and your family here. And what house and home, neighborhood do you tie to like that early beginning, I guess, for your childhood or just the family itself?
Yep. So I grew up on Buena Vista
Hmm.
between Dexter and Wildermere. Loved it. I mean, great neighborhood when you think about, kind of old school neighborhoods where, everybody looked out for each other and, other people's parents, if they, caught you doing something you shouldn't be doing, they would come after you and it was okay. Um, Went to school right down the street at McCullough. And it was a great time. Obviously, there were, a lot of social issues going on when I grew up too, because I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 when in the '67 uprising, and it was,
Mm.
I lived right off of Dexter, so there was a lot happening then, but it was, overall a great experience, and I love the neighborhood, so when I saw where I was coming today, I thought, "Oh, okay, I know this place."
Mhm.
Went to Parkman Library a lot of times after school. The kids knew my mother because she was a librarian there. It was just a great place to grow up.
Okay. All right. And in this same space of this neighborhood, and even then, we hear a lot of stories just definitely that are archived over the years about this community. And especially around that rebellion time.
Mhm.
What do you remember before the rebellion as my family, like in the 40s? We think of this transition from a primarily Jewish community into a Black community.
Mhm.
So you're here, and I'm guessing by 10. What do you remember as a child about the community, the businesses, the culture, those connections, more so than just like the neighbors kind of saying, like,
Right.
hey, yeah, don't be running in the street and all.
Well, some of that transition that you mentioned, I wasn't around for, but I do know that my parents were the first Black family to move on to Buena Vista at the
Mm,
time. It was, a Jewish community, and that they were the first to move on, and by the time I was, old enough to remember anything, I don't there was maybe, like, 1 Jewish household left on the block.
mm,
So, the transition happened
fast.
rapidly.
And I often uplift this as people speak to, I guess, like the exodus of Detroit, the mass exit, and when the population dropped, and so many of the white folks left Detroit, as they say, right after the rebellion. But so much of this even starts really in the 50s.
Oh, totally.
And shout out to that whole family, but Reparations Ray Jenkins and a lot of the other realtors at the time that were Black into communities that really, I would go as far as to say, even kind of still on a lot of these deeds, the covenants say no colored people can own these properties and
Mhm.
homes. Even to this day, like if you check the record, probably down at the deeds office and things like that. Good old American history,
Yes.
So you're witnessing, I guess, just in that short time, so from almost birth to possibly like 4 or 5, you're seeing a Black community, but a Black community of affluence in certain ways because they're buying these homes and turning this community into a Black community of people that are working and purchasing homes that were at one point in time not available to Black folks.
Yeah, it was a solidly middle-class neighborhood, and, we had folks on the neighborhood that, did a range of things, bus drivers, teachers, a doctor or 2, but yeah, I grew up, I didn't see that change that happened, but
Mhm.
it was quick, and and very stable
Mm.
when I was growing up, so
Okay. And after the rebellion, what
Mhm.
do you remember that community? Because that's not necessarily right at the epicenter when we think of where in Rosa Parks, but it's so close and so many of the businesses were impacted, just period.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my, dad on, I don't know, like, day 2 or 3 scooped us up and took us out of town
Mm,
because, there were curfews, you couldn't do anything, you couldn't, run down the street to play with your friends because their parents were everybody was keeping them close. I told you I lived off of Dexter Avenue, which was a thriving, area for Black-owned businesses at the time. I mean, you could go there and buy clothes, you could, there were a lot of stores there where you could shop, and it was a great place, and during the rebellion, a lot of that was burned. And I remember there was a cleaners at the end of my block. And I remember sitting on the porch and seeing, and people broke into the cleaners and stole clothes, and some people were storing their fur coats there. And I remember watching a Cadillac drive slowly down the street in front of my house, like you would in a parade with the top down and, sitting on the back of the car, like how you would, and wave to the people, and we're modeling, some of the clothes
mm,
from the cleaners. And as a kid who, I couldn't put together what was going on, it was kinda surreal.
mm. Okay. So you go away during that time.
Yes.
Where do you all go? Do you all stay close? Do you all travel to another city for family?
We Where did we go? I think we started off. Maybe that was the first time we actually went to Cedar Point. Nobody had
Wow.
heard of it at that point, and my mother
Okay,
said, "We're
wait.
going to Ce."
Time out. You definitely got to tell some early Cedar Point stories, now. What was the late '60s Cedar? What was the roller coaster going on
Well,
there?
it was, wood, it was,
Okay.
the Blue Streak, and, when we this was for real before people had heard about Cedar Point. So when my
Okay.
mother said, "We're going to Cedar Point," we were like, "What is that, and why do we
Hilarious.
need to go?"
Mhm.
And, we got there and we're like, "Oh, okay."
I'm with this.
So we ended up going a few places, and my dad was just monitoring the news so he could
Mm.
figure out when it was okay to come back because the police were clowning at the time. It was just, he just was trying to keep his family safe.
Okay. All right, and what did your dad do at the time? And, that's like, I mean, even today, I don't even know what type of, I guess, vacation pay. I don't know what you do in reference to situations like that. What was your dad
Right.
doing?
Well, also, life was a lot more affordable then. And
Mm,
so when we went, we stayed in motels. We weren't staying at the Hyatt Regency, but,
mm,
we'd stay at a motel. With a little pool or something like that. Um, My father started off working for Ford, half the city worked for one of the auto industries, and, transitioned and worked for the UAW. He was a
mm.
union man. He was
Wow.
a big union guy, and so that's what he did. My mother was, like I said, a librarian, so, it was a dual income household. Cost of living was fairly low at the time, so we were able to get away for a few days.
Okay. All right. So now let's fast forward past that and let's get into you and your journey through high school and then on to college.
Yep. So, um, went you know, to Immaculate High School,
Mm,
which at the time, now I'm not sure what it is. It's next door to Mary Grove,
mhm,
and it was a girls' school in the city near Mumford High School, not too far from Mumford. It was at Green Lawn and 6 Mile. And, you know, did that and just the regular kinda Detroit stuff, parties on the weekend in people's basements and all of that.
what was that journey? Was that a parochial school, I'm guessing, if it's
Yeah.
next to Mary Grove? And what was that journey like for you? How did you take to it? And then just the lessons and what were like some of your other classmates there?
So, when I went to Immaculata, I think, my freshman year, we were still living on Buena Vista, and then we moved, after that. I didn't wanna go. I
Mm.
mean, it was like a
All
battle.
girls school.
Yes,
No.
right. Nope, not doing that,
Uh-huh.
and it was a battle. Also, I like to swim, and, they didn't have a swim team, and I
Mm.
wanted to swim, so we really locked horns over that.
Mhm.
And my parents asked me to if I would just please try it for a year, and if I hated it, then
Change
I
out.
could, right? Because I wanted to go to Henry Ford. I had
Mm.
gone there to summer school, and, that's where I wanted to go. I knew friends who were going there. So, I caved, and I went, and I did actually like it.
Wow. What did you like about it?
I like that it was a progressive school. I think that at the time for, um, to be a young woman or, coming into young womanhood, it was a very supportive environment, very progressive environment, and, I it was a good fit.
Mm.
It was a fit that I could not have seen myself, so I think my parents, you know, were wise in encouraging me to go there, and I got a good education.
And you speak of Mary Grove now that it does have the project. I get that it's like the Mary Grove Project right now. I think that's the school there, like what it was called, and something that was looked at from a culmination of at one point in time when Mary Grove College was there, and UD Mercy, another one of the Catholic higher education institutions, and also Live Six. A lot of the University of Michigan studies there. The president of University of Detroit, Dr. Garibaldi, they all like said, okay, how can we be progressive about what we want to institute with schooling in this community and responsive to what neighbors are saying and really like a journey to start, I guess, like from infancy to through high school, what could be poured into the community. So Mary Grove is as the school and where that location where that school was before it was Bates Academy and other
Yep,
things, uh, it's become a project that a lot of I do know some parents that have children there, and it is a different offering of a school, kind of where the college was at one point in time, and that
right.
college being one of those institutions. Check the archives of Detroit is different, where during the rebellion and other things, it stood as um a unique relationship between Detroit's Black community and Catholic institutions. It's Detroit is different. That's all I
Yes.
gotta say. It's not sometimes it's not what you think, you know what I'm saying, about a lot of what those relationships are. So from high school, where do you go to college?
Michigan State.
You went to state.
Yep,
What
Spartan, go green. Yep.
what stood out about state for you?
I'm sorry?
What stood out? What attracted you to say, okay, I want to go to state?
This is gonna sound nuts, I know, but I only applied to one university, and it
Wow.
was Michigan State.
It's some academic advisor right now, like, yep, that's exactly what you do.
I
Jenna Calloway's
did.
like, yes, go green.
So I in high school, I worked at the Children's Zoo, which was on Belle Isle at the
Mm,
time. It's, been closed forever, but
mm,
and so we at the Children's Zoo, we had all these, small animals, and it was like a petting zoo.
mhm.
And I thought back then that, I'll go into veterinary medicine.
Wow.
And, there aren't a lot of vet schools, and Michigan State's the only one. And so if I was gonna, study that, that's where I need to go. So,
Okay, so that attraction. So
yes.
pets, zoos, but now I guess I gotta ask this question. How many pets did you have as a kid, and what drew you, were you
No,
one of those people, like, was like, "I gotta have them"?
actually, no, I had no pets at
Oh, man.
all until I was working at the zoo. One day, a guy came up to the zoo, and he had this cardboard box full of these newborn kittens. I mean, they were like newborn as in their eyes weren't even open yet, just these little tiny kittens. So he figured, well, here's a zoo, they'll do
There you
something
go.
with it. So,
Mhm.
the zoo wasn't in the business of taking in, kittens.
Mhm.
And so when they brought him in, the guy who was the zookeeper at the time said, "Oh, great. We can feed them to Jake, the python that we had." And
Wow.
and there were, I don't know, maybe about 6 of them. And I knew my mother hates cats.
Mm.
And, my dad wasn't really crazy about the idea, but I thought, I can't save them all. I can save one.
Mm.
So I picked one of the kittens out. And when my sister came to get me, or not when my folks came to get me, I don't know, somehow I hid this kitten and took it home. We kept her in the garage. It was the summer at the time, and fed her. We had a vet across the street who taught us some things to do to keep her
Mm.
alive. And my mother was out of town, so we
Mm.
thought, well, we will spring this on her when she gets back.
Hilarious.
And, we kept her. She was opposed to the idea, but eventually we moved Heather, the cat, into the house. Everybody in the family loved her. My mother would sometimes even cook for her.
Wow. So you guys did sway. That
Yes,
sounds like definitely one of those like almost like a children's story
it really
of
was. So,
how I got my parents to accept my cat.
yep, yep, yep.
All right, and then a veterinarian was across the street as well.
Yeah, well, she was a vet tech, and it
Oh,
was a
vet
good
tech.
thing that she was there because we didn't understand at the time that you had to that it was that little baby kittens couldn't go to the bathroom on their own.
Mm.
That's what their mom would, lick their belly. And
Mm.
if we hadn't gone over there, we wouldn't have known that.
Mm.
And so that would have been a huge problem for the cat.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Heather the cat, now that you say like kind of moved on in and everything,
Yep.
probably was part of the family and pictures and everything.
Yep. Well, when she moved in, she was restricted to the basement.
Oh, there you
It's like,
go.
okay, she can come in, but she has to live in the basement.
Hmm.
We said, okay, of course, we're going to agree to anything to get this cat in the house. And so we kept her in the basement, sort of, for a while.
Hmm.
And then, as you might guess, we eased her on up. She was caught upstairs so many times that I think finally my parents gave in.
Okay. All right. So state and this that relationship from the petting zoo to now having Heather the cat. How did you take to that school there? As I've spoke on this before. Michigan State has one heck of a just full agricultural department. Like
Right.
we think of agricultural institutions, or at least I used to think like, Texas A&M, or, like schools down south with a lot of farming land. But yeah, Michigan State has a lot into a lot of those sciences, and definitely a lot of farming science, veterinarian science, and upkeep for that. The institution is built like that.
Exactly.
How did you take to it? Did you, I'm guessing you get into a lot of math, science, and also getting your hands dirty and everything. How did you take to that?
So, as a freshman coming in, you are taking some specific classes,
Mhm.
math and science, chemistry, all of that. And it was an adjustment for me. I
Mm.
wasn't accustomed, Michigan State is huge.
Mhm.
And I had always been in these small school settings. And so to find myself in an auditorium with, a few hundred students, a professor in the front of the room with a microphone, or in some cases, we'd even have a professor. I had a chemistry class where you would go pick up these tapes and
Mm.
listen to the tapes and then take a test or something. And it was a lot to adjust to. And I figured out fairly quickly that this was probably not the major for me.
Mm. Okay. And what do you shift to?
Then I kind of drifted. It was
Mm.
just like, well, what is calling me? What are my interests? And I had interest in the social sciences, but I wasn't, you know, you're young, you don't know exactly. I wasn't one of those kids that always knew, like my sister always knew what she wanted to be. I did not have that.
Hmm.
So I floated around. I think I studied sociology for a bit, and no, I didn't like that. And somehow stumbled onto urban planning and urban studies,
Interesting.
and that stuck.
Okay. All right. Before that, and let's definitely that will make sense where you're at and starting there. But can you expand a little bit on as you talk about a young person at that time for you, looking into different things before being so self-determined of this is what I want to do and this is how I think it should go? Because it's a lot of people, young and old, but definitely I think in that age of young adult, 18 to maybe 23, 25, finding that definition. Can you speak a little bit to what was that journey like for you and how did you go about, you know, um, I guess having confidence in the process of knowing, you know, you're going to get somewhere, but I don't necessarily need to be so defined right now and not necessarily marrying yourself to what you said you're going to do.
So it was a bumpy journey, if I'm just gonna be honest about it. I kind of floundered because I didn't feel especially passionate about, anything. I didn't really feel like I
Mm,
had a direction or a calling.
mm,
I wasn't even sure at some points in time if was this even the right place for me to be. I knew growing up that, I would go to college. My mother did, and this was just gonna be something I was going to do, but now that I was there and not really having a goal in mind, I did kind of flounder.
mm,
I floundered and flunked out. How
mm.
about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know also, it's the parents that are like, and not just parents, I guess other adults and maybe even peers in your life that'll say, no, you gotta have this and you gotta have that. I know I'm very passionate about what I do, but also have learned to have that bandwidth in finding that definition. So then you stumble into urban planning as you speak to. What was it that spoke to you there that it's like, I like this?
Well, I took a class. So after, I stumbled and I sat out a semester and came back and, got a little bit more serious at that point about it.
Hmm.
Um, I think I had a counselor that suggested I, try a certain class. And I took this class. I really liked the professor.
Mm.
It really ignited something in me. And I thought, okay, I need to explore this further. Let me take more of these classes. And so I did. And that it was kind of organic at that point, that I found something that I could get passionate about. I'm, you know, from Detroit, and this was about, communities and improving communities, and there are a lot of different paths you could take within that, but, it pointed me in the direction that ultimately led to what I'm doing now.
Okay. And now I want to pause in that moment and then we're going to get to what you're doing now because let's frame a little bit of what's delivered when people hear urban planning. And also what was going on then. A lot of the designs of how government sees community and how businesses see community and how residents see community all converge under this whole concept of what community becomes. A lot of the urban planning kind of is a discussion that usually happens between businesses and politicians. And depending upon how you see things, Khary Frazier, this isn't even a
Yep.
Detroit is different opinion. This is a
Mhm.
Khary Frazier opinion, right? Because a lot of politicians have a lot of business support. Sometimes that conversation can be the same
Mhm.
versus what's responding to residents. So like, it'll be like, hey, let's look at this. The city of Detroit is actually currently going through different surveys of like, what do we see ourselves, the master plan for 25, 30 years from now and how these discussions happen. All of this is happening in urban planning. So this is like a Khary Frazier view of it.
Mhm.
What were some of those lessons early on in those introductions? And I'm guessing you had to have a very charismatic and engaging professor to like grab your attention into it. And how were you presented the role of urban planning and how it impacts people's lives?
Well, two of the professors that I had that really helped to, kind of encourage me in that direction, put information in front of me that made me want to, go deeper,
Mhm.
were also very much, focused on race.
Mm.
And its role in basically everything. And that spoke to me. And so that was a lens that I viewed my studies through. There, weren't a ton of planners or folks working in that field that were Black. And I never actually worked as a planner. But uh yeah, but though their influences, the focus on race, I think that you were talking about, input from, business, government, politicians, the community. There was less, uh, auth less input from the community then. I mean, it was on paper, but it was kind of a lip service sort of thing, check the box to say that, we did get some input. I have seen that change, I mean, dramatically over the years, thank heaven. So,
So early on, those discussions were like exclusively a corporate and political discussion.
not exclusively because I think there was some requirement for some level of community input, but, once upon a time, that might just be in the form of a public hearing or something like that. "Well, we had a public hearing on May 5th, so." Whereas now, going into the community, using different formats to reach, all segments of the community, that was not happening then.
Okay. And as I say, I'm going to jump forward, then we're going to jump backwards a
Okay.
little bit. But a partnership, what brings you here, and actually in studio, it's like he's off camera, but Ben Williams was like, "Are you familiar with Jane Fran?" I'm like, "Not necessarily, but am familiar with Data Driven Detroit." And it's like, well, this is a really cool tool that her organization has partnered with our organization to really engage community and arm community with data needed to move forward community's discussion in that three-part game of chess, I guess you'd have between politicians, business people, and residents. And data is so what's needed because oftentimes in these discussions, if you've been to the public hearing, if you've seen the community benefits uh, ordinance boards, right now, I mean, I think the most recent that stands out in my mind, just knowing so many people over there. I'm a Northwestern Colt, shout out Mighty Colts, but what's the relationship between what happened between the Detroit Pistons, Henry Ford, Michigan State's a little bit in that, and a lot of residents that feel as though Motown Museum's actually in that too, but a lot of residents over there in that community, the 48208 or Zone 8 community, feel as though it's being imposed upon. And a lot of data was what was missing because the data is what justifies, hey, we got to put a freeway through the Black community. You look at the data, the number shows that. And then the residents are like, I don't know any statisticians. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
So it's like, where do we got? Where do we go? So a neighborhood vitality index is a tool that's online and it's very functional for Detroiters. It indexes and gives like even in like breaks down the districts of city council. It breaks down the districts into different districts and has so many tools. But Ben spoke glowingly about your work coming to life through this tool. Speak a little bit about in your work over time, if you'd have had a tool like this going back earlier, how it could have been helpful.
Well, I think what makes the Neighborhood Vitality Index, special, there are a lot of things that set it apart from other, survey data collection efforts, but, the one of the things that really stands out is that it's it's community driven, and so there's data, and then but who decides what data we should be talking about? And the Neighborhood Vitality Index was developed with input from residents so that's how it was determined what questions would be asked. What are the indicators to measure? So this wasn't, imposed from the outside. This wasn't, a university coming in and saying we're going to study this and here are our questions. We identified the set of indicators. Okay, what is important to the community? What do we want? Your sense of safety in the community, the quality of life in a neighborhood, your access to recreational activities. What are those priorities? And that's what we're going to measure. And so that's what makes this, I think very special.
So, a tool like this early on in your work, how would you have implemented it in some of your journeys advocating for community in a lot of the urban planning process?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think the short answer is I'm not sure. And I say that because this was such a journey to get here.
Mm.
It wasn't like one day a few people said, "Hey, why don't we put together something called the Neighborhood Vitality Index?" There were so many attempts to develop something like this and um, to educate people, government, funders around the importance of doing something like that. Over the years, I've been doing this work for more than a minute and have been part of a few efforts to get something like this off of the ground. And so this was, decades in the making. Then finally, through this building the engine process that brought together Community Development Advocates of Detroit, Data Driven Detroit, and just a slew of stakeholders, community development organizations, and others to actually engage in a multi-year process to develop this.
Okay. All right. So with that, I don't know. You say this is taking time. You uplift CDAS. Shout out to Sarita. Sarita's coming back. So love me some Sarita. So
Rita is now,
I know she's at Skillman right now. But when
right,
I think CDAD, I think, well, it's many other people in great leadership still there. But
and also shout out to Madhavi, Madhavi Reddy.
yes,
Okay,
yes, Madhavi right now leading
right,
CDAD. But when I think CDAD, especially from before, I'm always thinking Sarita.
right.
And just like the iterations of time of that. At Skillman now, and shout out to Skillman too, Angelique and them. But But where does it start? Where do the discussions begin to start this if it started over the years for you?
Um, well, the discussions, I would say, predated NVI,
Mhm.
and I think at one point, um, we were having conversations with Kurt Metzger, who was a statistician at Wayne State's Center for Urban Studies, and he, kind of pulled together what is Data Driven Detroit and got that going. So there were conversations there. I remember, meetings with various folks at the city off and on through the years. It was just a sporadic thing that happened. And then when the building the engine of community development in Detroit, that initiative came about, led by Maggie DeSantis, and just pulled together, like I said, just a broad cross section of stakeholders centered around community development organizations. That's when it really finally, you know, started to come together.
So a lot of the CDCs got in the room and said, "We need something like this," or was it more so you being in that world uplifting that message as well? How can you give some
So
of that framework?
they were having conversations before I and my firm, JFM, got involved. And so we were brought in to, and we had done some work with a lot of those folks in different
iterations.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But so we were brought in to help facilitate part of the process, which was the development of what ultimately became the Neighborhood Vitality Index.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were, we gathered information from folks at the table. D3 was also there, helped to figure out. So, for example, what is a neighborhood for purposes of this? What does that look like? And geographically, have these neighborhood zones. And so all of this was done through that process.
Okay, so now we're gonna go back in time a little bit. As I
Okay.
said, we're gonna pick up from that college journey. So in this journey, definitions, stats, all of this definitely plays. And as you say, the definitions and statistics, boundaries, it can become very what's the term that I want to say? Detailed and specific. Because it needs to be very detailed and specific, I think, from that perspective, for the quantitative information. How it connects to a lot of people is a lot more story-driven and qualitative. When do you make this relationship, especially when you're talking about looking at this work from a racial lens and seeing it? I definitely know, coming from Detroit, seeing it for sure for Black folks. As you're starting your work, and you said you never really worked as an urban planner, where are your first projects? Where are you working? Where are you advocating? What are you working on?
Sure. So, after Michigan State, I moved away for a few years. I lived in Houston and in Austin.
Okay. All right. Which one first?
Houston.
Okay. Houston, another Black city. What era of Houston we talking?
I was in Southwest.
Okay. What era? Like what
era?
time?
Like this was
early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, 2000s, early.
This was in the mid 80s.
Mid 80s, Houston. Okay.
80s.
And in Texas, for anybody that has not been there, Texas is beyond it being hot as ever. Texas, when it comes to something like this, I think is very unique because of a lot of the zoning and I guess of conservative mindset. It's one of those places where it's like an oil rig next to a church, next to a school. And, a lot of people, I'm guessing definitely in your work is like, hey, this can't happen.
Well, they didn't have zoning. So that's why there was an oil field next to a church, next to a school, next to a house.
And a lot of the urban planning and the thought process is we want to boost a lot of business. So it's chaotic. What are some of the first projects you're working on when you go to Houston?
So I went to Houston, when I came out of Michigan State, the bottom had fallen out of the auto industry. I mean, you couldn't buy a job here. And that's why I went. I didn't want to go to Texas, but there were so many jobs there. I thought, what the heck? So I went there and I actually worked in marketing of all things, which I knew nothing about. Worked for Xerox for a few years. Decided, okay, this is not really the direction I want to go in. Let me shift gears. And I moved to Austin and I went to school at University of Texas and studied public affairs.
And added that to the mix. Austin, as now I think people kind of know, I guess post-pandemic, one of the more, it's Ann Arbor in Texas. That's kind of, I guess, the best way that I can frame it a little bit.
Yep. I think that's accurate.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And is that where you begin kind of working in this space of the work in urban planning, and now you add public affairs to it? There are, in the bed of so much of conservatism, there are very progressive political theories and thoughts there in Austin, definitely from the University of Texas's campus. Is that where you begin to work?
That's not where I began the work, but that was certainly where I kind of reaffirmed the direction I was going. And I had clarity at that point that I didn't have before. And so I was, at the LBJ school, I was fortunate enough to have, classes with former Representative Barbara Jordan. And I mean, it was really a very progressive enclave within a university that wasn't necessarily all that progressive.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So from there, when do you begin working in this field?
So when I graduated, I just had to get out of there. Texas was not for this girl. So
Mhm.
she needed to get back to Detroit.
Mm.
And I came back and I worked in philanthropy for a bit at the Community Foundation, which was just starting out at the time, and worked there for a few years, worked in development at Detroit, the DSO, Detroit Symphony Orchestra. So
Mm.
this is really kind of a patchwork quilt of occupations,
Mhm.
um, but it was all still, my focus was on, community life and particularly in Detroit. So, um, so while I was at I was only at the symphony for a couple of years, and I knew, that was a good job, but I didn't want to stay there. And I left work and went back to school
Mm.
again, this time in Ann Arbor, and that's when I really started to dig in.
Mm.
So I was studying urban planning at Michigan.
Again, okay. All right. So, like stalwart, large institutions where you get a lot of the schooling from, but definitely a lot of the jargon and theory that, end up becoming public policy because those schools definitely feed different arcs between MSU, University of Texas, and U of M.
Mhm.
So, after U of M, what project are you working on? Where do you go?
So I would say there was a convergence of I was able to bring my experience and connections up to that point from different areas in my life
Mhm.
to come together. So I was in school, I was, looking for some projects to work on. I had a fellowship, but I still needed more money than that was giving me. And so, when I talked to folks that I had met when I worked at the Community Foundation and, took on a project or two. Okay, Jane, can you do this? We need somebody to do thus and such. And, sure, I can do that. And I started that way, because I was familiar with a lot of nonprofit organizations in Detroit through my work at the Community Foundation. I had a sense of what I wanted to the area that I wanted to be in through my work, my studies in planning at Michigan. And it was just kind of a one thing led to another. I worked on a project for, um, it wasn't it was a United Community Services. I don't even know if you remember that organization, but,
Mhm.
um, and so I worked on a couple of small projects that were related to community development, and it just evolved.
Okay. All right. And what era of Detroit are we talking as you begin working? Like, so I guess in eras of Detroit, um, is this the Mayor Kilpatrick era? Is this Mayor Duggan, Mayor Bing? What era are you begin or Mayor Archer?
So this must have been Archer, I
Mm.
guess. This must have been Archer. Um, One of my first projects was with Warren Connor Development Coalition.
Wow. Which becomes East Side Community
Right,
Network, Maggie
exactly.
DeSantis.
Yep.
Mhm.
So, and I knew Maggie from, my work at the
Philanthropy.
Community Foundation.
Mhm.
Right, exactly. So, worked on a project, there, and it just and this is before, now there's such a focus on entrepreneurism, and I mean,
Mhm.
there wasn't then. So I was just really kind of feeling my way and fumbling around. No business cards, there was no website or anything like that.
Mhm.
And so as people ask, "Hey, can you do this?" I would say, "Yes," as long as it was within what I considered to be my wheelhouse. And it grew to the point where, because I had a daughter, I was a single parent at that point,
Mm.
and I needed to, keep a roof over her head.
There you go.
Right. So it just kind of came together, and then, I started to bring on other consultants.
and grew from there.
And grew from there.
And also at this time, I'm guessing your knack for two things. Definitely seeking education and going back and uh, getting that information. But I'm also thinking like deep diving in research, kind of shout out to your mom as a librarian. I'm thinking you're pulling a lot of that information because this is the internet is there, but not as accessible. So you have to know how to research this stuff.
Yes, yes. And I'm kind of a research junkie anyway, so this
Mm.
was all right up my alley. And occasionally in the early days, someone would ask me if I could do something, and I would say, "Yeah, I can do that." And then I would have to go figure out how to do
Mm.
that because
Okay.
we haven't done this before. So
Okay, for all young people watching, it was a life before Google. I'm just saying.
right.
And Chat GPT.
Exactly.
Like, wow.
Exactly. So
Yes. And libraries, the Dewey Decimal System, all types of stuff that you just would have to know how to process getting those books and processing that information. So you grow the consultancy really as, I'm guessing, if you're helping Warren Connor and word of mouth and a lot of the other people you remember from philanthropy, like a Swiss Army knife for a lot of the nonprofit organizations that you've kind of come in part with. And in doing that work, this is where you start seeing the need for like more tools around data.
yeah, I mean, data always played a role in what we do. So but all been designing surveys for a long time, for example, and facilitating focus groups, gathering information and data to help inform decisions for, people, usually organizations. Um, and always wanting to see something that, like NVI for Detroit, that we can look over time, over a period of time and measure change and track and see decisions made by using the data. And so this it so we worked on projects that involved the collection of data since I've been doing this, but this was an opportunity through the NVI to, bring that to this citywide initiative that was going to, bring the city and everyone who's interested in investing in it information that without it they would not have access to.
Okay. All right. Now this is a whole more so. This is definitely a Khary question.
Okay.
But working intimately with a lot of the projects and nonprofits over time is seeing this work come to life, programming projects.
Mhm.
What do you think? What do you think is sometimes that missing conversation between the government, the business, and the communities that you've noticed over time to really get everybody on the same page?
Okay, another good question, and I don't know that it's necessarily that something's missing,
Mm.
but I think that too often they are separate conversations, so the residents aren't always, in the room with the funders or city government or I mean, they're separate conversations, separate interests, and really we need everyone having the same conversation.
Mm.
Talking about this together because people have their own priorities and interest. And so let's what does this look like? What can we, come to agreement about together?
And with that, and shout out Derek and Invest Detroit, but I've got kicked out of a lot of different things. But I remember one time, they were meeting at Invest Detroit, and I'm like, it's tough because I got to go through like 3 security guards to get here in the first place, and then we're looking in from a glass tower down at the city. Like from a community lens, I'm already disoriented. Sometimes the power dynamic of even I don't want to say setting, but I guess I can't think of anything else.
Yeah.
And shout out to Mama Neb for doing her dissertation. Dr. Gloria House's dissertation is about spaces and places and parks and where things go. But
Mhm.
like just the setting itself kind of can stifle
I
certain
agree.
discussions from happening.
Yes, totally. I agree. Yes, people need to feel, um, like you want them to be heard, like,
Hmm.
comfortable, and so if that takes place in a setting, like you said, kind of a formal ivory tower setting that isn't the setting that people that the people you're talking to find themselves in on a regular basis, they're not going to be as comfortable there, and so there needs to be, a better distribution of power in terms of voice and who gets to be heard. I agree.
And also, I'm definitely bouncing back a little bit too, putting on my marketing firm, exactly. But at Xerox, were you doing this type of work? Because like focus groups, surveys, this is all in the marketing suite. Thi- This is in the marketing suite
Right,
as well. But obviously, when corporations do this, they're trying to figure out the best way to make you wake up and buy a breakfast
right.
sandwich or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you weren't in that. You were exclusively offering these services to a lot of community groups and organizations, not just needing data, but also it adds confidence into what they're going to do.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations and
Mm,
foundations and, uh, help to, use this information, surveys, interviews, focus groups, all of that to, uh, you know, help either support a strategic planning process they were doing, to help them, identify what kind of programs that needed to be developed in the community, or to measure what they're doing to see if it's having an impact.
okay. All right. So, what have been some of those key impacts that you've seen over time in this work when everything does align?
Oh, I think there've been a lot of examples of that. Of course, now I'm just scratching my
Brain for
brain
like
to come up
what
with
is
a
an
specific
example to throw out
example,
there?
but,
Mhm.
um, but,
And not necessarily specific project and
right.
program as much as like what's a good sign to know just in your experience that okay, we're going down the right street. This isn't leading to dead end conversations.
So, and that's one reason why it's important to have community voice define what the indicators are. What is it that we're going to measure here? Is it we're going to measure? So, for example, workforce development programs where they're trying to, move people into employment. Well, that's great. Are they being moved into jobs that where they're able to stay? What does retention look like? Are there, upwardly mobile opportunities there? Is this a dead-end job? Is this something that, supporting their family, that they're able to support a family on? So, getting, community voice reflected in what's important to measure, um, is is, part of what drove the development of the Neighborhood Vitality Index.
Okay. All right. And now really looking even into the future, but
Mhm.
like from a lens of today. The workforce thing can be very tough. I'm big into also thinking that the perception in which we see our communities have a lot to do with the perception of how the story is told. Hence, the narrative matters so much. So, a lot of people end up in the upwardly mobile job, and the first thing they do is leave the community that I've seen, you know. Now, it's not a definite, but it's back to like these relationships also to like how we perceive and connect to community. And that becomes tough. And also, before our eyes, our city of homeowners has become
Mhm.
a city of renters,
Right.
which makes so much more of how you track and follow what people say. How does that impact? I think it impacts it tremendously as far as needing to stay abreast to this. But how do you see this impacting NVI with residency and how people that are Detroiters see themselves in the pride of staying in their community and being in Detroit?
Right. Well, I mean, it's critically important. I mean, some of the data that's collected through NVI will help us to track that. We ask people, residents, if they're, planning to stay in their neighborhood over the next year. It's important when I mentioned earlier about upwardly mobile jobs. Some people need that just to be able to keep their home,
Where
to
they're at
stay
now.
there.
Yeah.
So that's important. And so that's why we have we have measures in the NVI so that we can track some of those important things.
Okay. All right. And with that being said, we getting to a close here.
Okay.
But in that, you've grown this organization, the consultancy. Now, how do you, because in some ways, I mean, like just from a business lens, you would say the NVI kind of may have taken some of your business out of the equation in some ways. You know what I'm saying? But now you have one heck of a tool to bring people to. How does your firm move forward with this tool that at some points in times, I'm guessing you worked on projects and programs and supported those that would need exactly what they can get here? How does your organization, um, I guess, move forward with that type of progressive lens, you in the leadership position? So that's a long Khary Frazier question. Let me bundle it up fast and make it more plain for you guys to see and understand this. It's a lot of people that work in the group of wanting to help community,
Hmm.
and they've gotten a lot of help to help community. And then they get a resource that solves the problem that they were solving for the community, and it kind of takes the need for that organization away. NVI is one of those key tools that a lot of the work that I'm guessing you've done in the past now could deliver and support it. So how do you prepare not just you yourself, but like your team to be like, okay, no, let's embrace this tool. Let's make sure that this is amplified.
Well, one of the things that that we try to do is to educate all segments of the community, funders, government, residents, CDOs, others, on the value of the data, because the NVI's value is in collecting this survey over time. If this was just like a one-time survey, it wouldn't really have the impact that it can have if you're able to look over time and see what change is happening or not happening in a neighborhood and where investments need to be made. So I see this, it belongs to the community, where our role in this is to help facilitate the implementation of it, to do outreach like this to encourage residents to take the survey, because that's what gives us the data that we need, and we need to hear from Detroit residents over time.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I'm definitely it's going to be some more relationships, as you all see what Detroit is different and the Detroit is different way of like, yo, you need to take the survey. And I already know you thinking about surveys and it's like, oh, what these people want from me. All right. Now, this is a tool that really helps even arm the Block Club Association too. So I would say Block Club or just community resident. A couple years ago, I think so much of my support was that project when, as I always say, my whole neighborhood got sued from a development coming over here. So a tool like this, if known about that, would have been a lot more helpful even in the argument we're making. So even as I piece together the ending of that story,
Hmm.
you better believe that some information from the NVI will be included in that. So this was fun. I want you to have people get information if they want to get in contact with you, how to connect. How should they?
So what I really want is for people to take the survey. So
There
we
we
want
go.
them to go to nvidetroit.org, and there's a link, click the link to take the survey. There's an incentive available because the survey takes, 15 minutes-ish plus. So it's not super short, but there's a $25 gift card for residents. You have to be a Detroit resident, 18 or over to take it. But other than that, complete the survey, you get the gift card, and can take it online, can take it on your phone. We're also around at various community events can take it in person. Some people, we've even administered it over the telephone. But yeah, we want to hear from residents. We want to hear about, how safe they feel in their neighborhoods, how they feel about the quality of the housing in their communities. If they're planning to stay in their neighborhoods, do they have access to support systems that they need? Just a range of questions that residents have decided are a priority, and we want that data.
All right. And definitely, as I said, take the survey. Take the survey. They're going to be at the Collard Green Cook-Off. You can take the survey there. But also, like I say, the relationship is going to connect, because this is only going to help us. With that being said, classic Detroit is different questions now. Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
I'm sorry. My very first car?
Yep. Year, make, and model, and year you got it.
It was a Mazda 626. And it was probably 82.
Okay. All right. Where was the first place you went when you got it?
Ooh, I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
You should have given me a heads up.
Hilarious.
At the end of the fireworks. Oh, I love music. But at the end of the fireworks, what would I play? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. What would be good for the end of the fireworks?
I mean, you the DJ. It's your playlist.
I know, but now I'm not. You should have given me a heads up. I could have come in with something really good. Well, a song that I heard the other day that's a throwback that I really love is Greatest Dancer.
Okay.
And I mean, it's catchy.
Classic DJ. Yeah, that's a DJ hit.
Yes, it is. So,
okay. And then one more. You got to give me one more.
Give you one more. Another one. It's got to be upbeat because it's the end of the fireworks. Oh, you got to give me a break. Can I play that twice?
Hilarious. You going out. You're going to have the people dancing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Oof. One Detroiter. Detroit is so rich in, people that you could name stuff after. You should really give people a heads up on these. I would name it after my dad.
Okay, I like that. Uplift his name.
I would uplift his name. He quietly made some very significant contributions.
In UAW, what was his name?
Joseph Charles Morgan.
Joseph Charles Morgan. Okay.
Yes. In fact, way back in the day, because I told you he was, a union guy and a civil rights guy, and he brought Rosa Parks to Detroit for the first time because things were really, hot down south, and they needed to get her out of there. And he took up a collection at Ford and to bring her up here. She'd be safe.
That is deep, and I never knew that, but that's one heck of a story right there.
Yep, I've got a picture of her in our living room on Buena Vista from way back in the day.
Wow. That is something. Yes.
So that's who I'd name the street after.
Shout out Mr. Morgan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Detroit is different. Peace.
Detroit is different. Detroit is